Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we are taking a really fascinating journey. We're going deep into the mechanics of your own mind. Specifically, we're tackling something that frustrates so many people, achieving real, genuine English fluency.
Yeah, getting past that intermediate hump.
Exactly. We're not talking generic advice here. We're diving into this powerful idea, how you can actually rewire your brain to use English automatically.
In this deep dive, it's really aimed at you if you've ever felt that awful feeling of being stuck, you know?
Oh, definitely. Like, you know the words, maybe you know the grammar, but it just doesn't come out smoothly.
Precisely. Or you can't quite think in English. So our goal today is practical tools rooted in, well, neuroscience, actually. Things to make learning easier, faster, and, this is key, more instinctive.
We want to give you the scientific understanding, how it works, so you can actively change the way your brain handles a new language. It's all about leveraging your brain's own adaptability.
Sure.
But let's start with the big one. This phrase, rewire your brain. What does that actually mean when we're talking about learning English?
That's the perfect place to begin. Because rewiring sounds, I don't know, a bit sci-fi, maybe. But it's actually a totally natural process happening all the time.
Okay.
Simply put, it means physically changing your brain's structure, optimizing it, building completely new, efficient connections, neural pathways specifically for English.
So not just learning facts, but building infrastructure.
Exactly. Think of your native language like a network of familiar, well-paved superhighways. Your brain zooms along them without thinking.
Effortless.
Right. Learning English, that's like building a whole new road network from scratch. Dirt tracks at first, maybe, but roads for thinking in English, speaking in English, understanding.
Yeah.
All without taking that detour back through your native language highway.
I like that analogy, building new roads. But let's get into the science a bit more. Our brains aren't fixed, right? Especially not once we're adults. There's this incredible adaptability. Neuroplasticity is the big term.
That's the one. But for day-to-day learning, language learning, we're often talking about something maybe a bit more immediate, sometimes called microelastics.
Microelastics. Okay, what's the difference there?
Well, neuroplasticity can mean those big, large-scale changes over years. Microelastics is more about the constant, small adjustments happening, moment by moment as you practice.
Ah, okay. So it's the real-time effect of practice.
That's where the magic is. When you actively try to speak English or understand it, your brain strengthens the physical connections between the neurons involved. It's a process called synaptogenesis, basically, making new synapses or strengthening existing ones.
So if I struggle to recall a new word or try to piece together a sentence, I'm literally forcing those tiny connections to get stronger.
You got it. And it goes deeper. As you repeat that action, saying the word, hearing the phrase again and again, your brain starts doing something else. It wraps a fatty substance called the myelin sheath around that pathway.
Myelin. I've heard of that, like insulation on a wire.
Exactly like insulation. The thicker the myelin sheath around a neural pathway, the faster and more efficiently the signal travels down that path. Less signal loss, quicker transmission.
Wow. So fluency at a brain level is really just having really well-insulated English pathways, highly myelinated pathways.
That's a fantastic way to put it. And it explains why consistent repetition is so vital. You're not just memorizing, you're literally speeding up your brain's English processing hardware by adding insulation.
Okay, this changes everything. We're not just filling a memory bank, we're physically upgrading the processing speed. So this explains the shift from, say, declarative memory knowing grammar rules like facts to procedural memory.
Precisely. Declarative memory is knowing about English. You can recite the rule. Procedural memory is like muscle memory. It's the automatic, unconscious ability to use English, to speak, to understand without actively thinking about the rules.
Where did that shift happen in the brain?
It moves from the conscious effort areas, like your prefrontal cortex, the part that does the heavy thinking and planning, to deeper structures, like the basal ganglia, which are crucial for habits and automatic skills.
Like driving a car or riding a bike. You don't think about every single step after a while.
Exactly the same principle. When English becomes fluent, you've essentially moved it into those automatic procedural centers. It runs without conscious effort.
Which brings us back to that feeling of awkwardness. When speaking feels slow or clunky, it's not that you're bad at English.
Not at all. It just means those specific English roads, those pathways, are still under construction. They're maybe just dirt tracks, right? They haven't been used enough to get paved and myelinated and handed over to the automatic systems.
So forgetting words, feeling shy, it's actually a sign that the brain is working, but the connections aren't strong or fast enough yet.
It's positive feedback in a way. It shows your brain is actively trying to build that new capacity, that initial difficulty. That's the feeling of growth. It's the effort required to build something new.
Okay, that's a much more encouraging way to look at it. We understand the brain can change. So now, the big question. Why does it often feel so incredibly hard? What are the roadblocks?
Yeah, if the brain's so adaptable, why the struggle? It's really important to normalize this difficulty first. Learning a new language is a fundamental challenge for the brain.
Right.
We sometimes talk about the brain being lazy, but it's more accurate to say it's incredibly efficient. It hates wasting energy.
The path of least resistance.
Always. If it has that superhighway available your native language, why on earth would it choose to struggle down a bumpy, unfinished dirt road English unless it absolutely has to?
It's about cognitive load, isn't it?
Yeah.
The mental effort required.
Massively. Using English, especially when you're not yet fluent, demands huge amounts of cognitive energy. You're decoding sounds you're not used to, trying to remember vocabulary, applying grammar rules that might feel alien, formulating thoughts in a new structure. It's exhausting for the brain.
And that energy demand shows up as specific roadblocks.
Definitely. First up, a really big one, structural difference.
Between languages.
Yeah. If your first language has a very different structure from English, maybe different sounds, completely different grammar rules, sentence order, maybe even reading direction. Think Japanese or Arabic or Mandarin compared to English's subject-verb-object structure.
Then the brain has a much bigger job to do.
Exponentially harder in the early stages. It's not just learning new words, it's building entirely new blueprints for how language works, how thoughts are even organized. It has to create whole new neural maps. A Spanish speaker learning English has a structural head start in some ways.
But it's not just vocabulary, it's literally reshaping how you structure thought.
Absolutely. And then you hit perhaps the most powerful roadblock of all, fear.
Ah, the mental block.
It's more than just a mental block, it's a cognitive chokehold. The fear of making mistakes, the fear of sounding silly, of not being understood. It's not just unpleasant, it's actually, well, physiologically damaging to the learning process itself.
Wait, physiologically damaging. How does fear physically stop the rewiring?
Okay, so when you feel that acute anxiety or fear, your brain's alarm system, the limbic system, especially the amygdala, kicks in. It releases stress hormones like cortisol.
Fight or flight.
Right, it's a survival mechanism. But here's the problem. When your limbic system is firing on all cylinders like that, it tends to suppress or inhibit higher cognitive functions, especially the ones in the prefrontal cortex needed for complex tasks, like accessing vocabulary, constructing sentences, forming new memories, the very things you need for language learning.
So being afraid to speak literally puts the brakes on the brain's learning machinery.
It slams them on. You can't effectively practice, you can't consolidate memories, you can't strengthen those pathways if your brain is in panic mode. The fear shuts down the engine you need to build the roads.
That's a massive insight. It means making mistakes isn't just, okay, it's magamuned. It's biologically necessary to keep learning. You have to speak, even imperfectly, to keep the system running.
Precisely. Which leads us straight into the third major roadblock, a really common bad habit, internal translation.
Translating in your head before you speak.
Yeah, it feels like the safe route, right? It's the brain desperately trying to stick to that familiar superhighway. It avoids the difficulty of building the new road directly from the concept, the idea you want to express, straight to English.
So instead of concept, right arrow English.
It forces this detour. Concept, right arrow native language, right arrow translate, word by word, phrase by phrase, right arrow English.
Can you walk through the mental steps there? It sounds exhausting.
It is. Imagine you want to say, I need to buy milk after work. Instead of that thought just emerging in English, your brain might do this.
Okay.
1. Concept forms. Need milk, post-work purchase. 2. Thought constructed in native language, e.g., necesito comprar leche después del trabajo. 3. Grammar rules applied, vocabulary selected in the native language. 4. Then it attempts a word-for-word or phrase translation back into English. I need buy milk after the work. 5. Then you speak it, maybe correcting slightly as you go.
Yeah, a lot of steps. It explains why translated speech often sounds unnatural and why it feels so slow.
Exactly. That 4 or 5-step detour kills fluency. You're always lagging behind the conversation because you're running this internal translation software. Your brain thinks it's saving energy by using the familiar native language pathway, but the translation process itself is incredibly inefficient and prevents the direct English pathways from ever getting built and myelinated.
So, If English feels hard, if you're translating in your head, if you're scared to speak, you're basically in that heavy construction phase. You're trying to break old habits and build new infrastructure.
And the solution isn't about being smarter. It's about more practice, yes. But crucially, it's about building the right kinds of habits, new routines that are energy-saving for the brain in English.
Which brings us perfectly to the power of habits, how we can actually harness the brain's preference for efficiency to accelerate the rewiring.
Exactly. If the brain loves energy-saving shortcuts, let's build some English shortcuts.
Right. We know the brain wants to conserve energy, loves the path of least resistance,
Yeah.
and we know internal translation is actually a high-cost detour, even if it feels familiar.
So we need automatic, low-cost ways to operate in English. And that, right there, is the genius of using habits for language learning.
Because habits are the brain's ultimate energy savers.
They absolutely are. Habits are actions that, through repetition, become automatic. The brain shifts the control of these actions away from the energy-guzzling prefrontal cortex
For thinking part.
and hands them over to the basal ganglia. You can think of the basal ganglia as the brain's autopilot center. It handles routines, skills, things we do without conscious thought.
Like brushing your teeth or driving that familiar route.
Exactly. So when we talk about building fluency, what we're really talking about is deliberately engineering English communication habits, training the basal ganglia to handle chunks of English automatically.
So repeating a phrase or a structure, often enough, literally trains a different part of the brain to take over, making it faster and effortless.
That is the precise neural mechanism. Think about a simple greeting. The first few times you say, "How's it going?" you might consciously think about the words, the order, maybe the contraction, "how's."
Yeah, constructing it piece by piece.
But after saying it dozens, hundreds of times, it becomes a single unit. Bam, it just flows out. The sound, the meaning, the muscle movements of your mouth, they're all linked in one fast, efficient circuit managed by the basal ganglia. That's habit formation in action, and it saves the brain a ton of energy.
This also debunks a huge myth, doesn't it? The idea that you need these massive marathon study sessions.
Oh, completely. If the goal is strengthening pathways through repetition and getting the basal ganglia involved, then consistency beats intensity every time. 3 hours cramming on a Sunday. It's nowhere near as effective for myelination as, say, focused effort every single day.
Even if it's just a small amount each day.
Absolutely. Solid research backs this up. Consistent, focused practice for just 10 to 15 minutes every day is profoundly better for building and insulating those neural pathways than irregular long sessions.
Why is that consistency so much better?
The brain needs regular rhythmic reinforcement. It needs to see that this English thing is important, that it's being used frequently. That regular signal tells the brain, okay, this pathway is getting used a lot, it's probably important, let's invest some resources like myelin to make it faster and more efficient. Sporadic use doesn't send that strong signal.
Okay, so consistency over volume. Quality and regularity over sheer quantity.
That's the mantra. Now, if we know the brain loves these energy-saving habits, we have to be really careful we're not accidentally reinforcing the wrong ones.
Like the internal translation habit we just talked about.
Yeah.
Or the habit of avoiding speaking out of fear.
Exactly. Every time you default to translating, you strengthen that inefficient detour pathway. You make the brain more reliant on your native language. Every time you avoid speaking, you strengthen the habit of silence and avoidance.
So we need to consciously starve those unhelpful habits.
And actively feed the new, direct English habits. The simplest way to start. Force low-stakes English thinking.
How do you mean? Like narrating your day?
That's a great way. The core idea is to connect the concept directly to English, skipping the native language step. So yeah, connect English to your immediate daily experience.
Like when you're doing chores or cooking?
Perfect example. When you're cooking, don't just think about the ingredients, name them out loud if possible. Okay, I need the onions. I'm chopping the carrots now. The water is boiling.
So you're linking the real-world object or action directly to the English word or phrase.
You're forging that direct concept, right arrow English link. You're making the connection tangible, sensory, specific. That's much more powerful for wiring than just memorizing a word from a list. You're forcing your brain to use English as the primary label for the world around you, even for simple, everyday things.
Okay, that makes sense. Build the habit of thinking in English about mundane things first.
And this brings us to expectations. You start building this new road. When does it start feeling less like a muddy track and more like pavement? How long does this take?
Yeah, the time frame is important.
Generally, psychological research suggests habits, these automatic pathways, take roughly 21 to 30 days of consistent, almost daily effort to really start feeling automatic, to stick.
So about 3 to 4 weeks of really committing to it.
That's the critical period. You need patience during that initial phase. Your brain will resist. It wants to use the old highways. But if you push through that initial discomfort, that 21 30-day window, you cross a threshold. The brain starts to recognize the new pathway is useful, maybe even more efficient for certain things, and it begins to naturally support the new habit.
Okay, so manage expectations. That first month is crucial for laying the foundation. We know we need habits. We know consistency is key. Let's get really practical now. What are the high-impact daily practices people can start today to actively build these pathways?
Right, let's build the blueprint.
The roadmap seems clear. Small, consistent daily actions. That's what creates the lasting change, the rewiring. So let's break down these 5 core practices. Simple things you can do every day to force your brain to engage with English and strengthen those pathways.
Okay, practice number 1, perhaps the most fundamental. Listen to English every day. And we usually recommend aiming for about 30 minutes a day. But crucially, we need to talk about different types of listening.
Right. It's not just having English noise in the background, is it?
Not entirely. That's passive listening. Putting on a podcast or music while you're cooking or commuting, that's actually quite good. It helps your brain get used to the rhythm, the intonation, the general soundscape of English. It helps with unconscious pattern recognition.
Okay, so passive listening has value, but it's not enough on its own for active rewiring.
Exactly. For the real rewiring, you also need periods of active listening. This means giving the English audio your full attention, even if just for 5 or 10 minutes within that 30-minute block.
What do you focus on during active listening?
You might focus specifically on catching new vocabulary, or listening for how the speaker links words together, or trying to mimic the intonation patterns, or even just trying to grasp the main idea without translating. The key is focused attention. Both active and passive listening contribute, but active listening builds comprehension and detail more directly.
Got it. Okay, practice number 2. You called this the game changer earlier. Speak out loud.
Yes, this is non-negotiable for fluency. Listening and reading build receptive skills, but fluency requires production. Speaking physically creates and strengthens the auditory motor pathways needed to produce English sounds and rhythm.
Even if you're alone. It feels a bit weird talking to yourself.
Get over the weirdness. It's incredibly effective. Talk to yourself. Describe what you're doing as you make coffee. Okay, now I'm adding the milk. Summarize out loud the podcast you just listened to. Read a sentence from a book and then say it out loud without looking.
Why is the physical act so important?
It trains your mouth muscles, gets you comfortable with the physical feeling of producing English sounds, and crucially, it activates the self-correction loop. When you speak out loud, you hear yourself.
So you catch your own mistakes?
Yes. Your brain hears the output, compares it to the target sound or structure it was aiming for, registers the mismatch, the error, and immediately starts making micro adjustments to the neural pathway for the next attempt. If you only practice silently in your head, you bypass this critical auditory feedback loop. Progress is much, much slower without it.
Okay, speak out loud even if it feels strange. Got it. Practice number 3. Use English in real life. This is about immersion, right? Even if you're not in an English-speaking country.
Exactly. Force English into your everyday environment. We mentioned labeling things, your desk, your lamp, the fridge. Do it. Write those labels. See them every day.
What else? Go beyond labels.
Oh, yeah. Change your phone's language setting to English. Force yourself to navigate menus in English. Change your computer OS language. Write your shopping lists only in English. Use an English calendar for your appointments. Meeting at 3 p.m., dentist apt.
So every time you check your phone or your list or your schedule, you're getting these tiny natural exposures and forcing your brain to connect daily tasks directly to English words.
You're bypassing the translation detour constantly. You're making English the default operating language for parts of your life.
Okay, practice 4. Reading out loud. This sounds similar to speaking out loud, but with text.
It is, but it adds another layer. It directly connects the visual stimulus, the written word, to the motor production of speaking it.
Why is that connection helpful?
Because often, you can recognize a written word passively much more easily than you can produce it actively in speech. Reading out loud forces your brain to map that familiar written form onto the complex muscle movements needed to pronounce it correctly. It also helps you practice linking words together smoothly, mimicking natural speech flow, and matching intonation to punctuation and meaning.
So it bridges the gap between passive recognition and active production. How much should you read aloud?
Doesn't have to be long, a short news article, a paragraph from a book, even just a few interesting sentences you found. Daily consistency is more important than volume.
Makes sense. And the final core practice, number 5, journaling in English, just writing down thoughts.
It can start that simple, yes.
Yeah.
Just getting comfortable expressing basic ideas in writing. But to really maximize the neural benefit, especially as you progress, try adding some structure.
Structure, how so?
Don't just write, "Today was okay, I felt tired." Challenge your brain. For example, set a rule for your entry. Today I must use at least 3 different verb tenses. Maybe past simple, present continuous, and future simple. Or I must include 1 conditional sentence, if then. Or I need to use 5 new vocabulary words I learned this week in context.
So you're deliberately forcing your brain to grapple with specific grammatical structures or vocabulary, not just free writing.
Exactly. This turns journaling from simple practice into targeted training. You're pushing the boundaries of your current English road system, forcing it to build more complex structures and connections.
Okay, let's recap those 5 core practices. 1, listen every day, active and passive. 2, speak out loud, even to yourself. 3, use English in real life, change settings, lists. 4, read out loud, connecting visual to spoken. 5, journal in English with structure for challenge.
Do this consistently, even for short periods daily, and you are rewiring your brain for English. But all of this practice can still be undermined if your underlying mindset isn't right.
Right, the practices are the how, but the mindset is the will I actually stick with it and benefit from it.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the crucial mindset shift needed to go from struggling student to fluent speaker.
It really is amazing how much our thoughts, our internal dialogue, can physically affect our brain's ability to learn. We've got the science, we've got the daily practices, but mindset, that feels like the operating system running it all.
It really is. It acts like the accelerator or the brake pedal on the whole rewiring process. And negative self-talk, that's like slamming on the brakes.
That's like, oh, I'm just not good at languages, or I sound so stupid when I speak, or I'll never get this.
Exactly. Those aren't just unhelpful thoughts. They are active inhibitors. Remember what we said about fear and cortisol?
Yeah, it shuts down the learning parts of the brain.
Right. So that negative self-talk generates stress and anxiety, which triggers cortisol release, which inhibits memory formation and cognitive flexibility. You are literally making it harder for your brain to learn when you indulge in that kind of thinking.
They actually become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you think you'll fail, the stress you create makes you more likely to stumble.
Precisely. So the first step is awareness, notice that negative talk. The second step is to actively change the narrative. We need to use positive affirmations or maybe just more realistic growth-oriented statements.
So instead of, I can't speak English well,
Try focusing on the process, the direction, I'm getting better every day, or my speaking is improving with practice, or even, I choose to speak confidently today, even if I make mistakes.
it's subtle, but it shifts the focus from a fixed state, I'm bad, to a dynamic process, I'm improving.
And that shift is crucial. It switches the brain out of that threat-fear state and into a more open, receptive, growth-oriented state.
This ties into the idea of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right?
Absolutely central to it. A fixed mindset assumes your abilities, like language aptitude, are innate and unchangeable. If you struggle, it means you're just not good at it.
Which leads to giving up easily.
Right. A growth mindset, on the other hand, believes abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Challenges aren't signs of failure, they're opportunities to learn and grow. How does this specifically help rewire the brain for language?
Yeah. Let's connect mindset to the neurons.
A growth mindset reframes mistakes entirely. If you make a mistake speaking and your mindset is growth, you think, okay, interesting, I used the wrong word there. Why? What's the right one? Let me find out. Your brain logs that as useful data, an active learning event. It helps refine the pathway.
Whereas with a fixed mindset, the mistake feels like proof of your inadequacy.
And your brain reacts by wanting to avoid that feeling. It might shut down practice, avoid speaking situations. But when you embrace mistakes as necessary feedback, your brain stays engaged, open, curious. It keeps working on refining that neural map.
So mistakes aren't failures. They are literally evidence that your brain is in the process of building and testing new connections. They are data points for improvement.
Every single time you speak or write, even with errors, you are giving your brain a chance to practice and refine. We absolutely have to shift the focus from perfection to progress.
Perfectionism is the killer of fluency.
It really is. Because it breeds fear. If you wait until you can speak perfectly before you open your mouth, you'll never speak. You deny your brain the very practice it needs to make the skill automatic and procedural.
So it's okay not to be perfect. What matters is the trajectory, the continuous improvement, maybe even enjoying the process of learning.
Enjoying the process is huge. If it feels like a punishment, your brain will resist. Find ways to make it enjoyable. But yes, focus on getting a little bit better each day, each week. Celebrate the small wins.
So if you feel stuck today, the most powerful first step might just be changing that internal sentence from "I'll never be fluent" to something like,
I'm getting closer to fluency with every practice session. Or, my brain is building new English connections right now. That positive focus on growth keeps motivation high, reduces the stress that inhibits learning, and encourages the brain to keep investing energy in those new pathways. It's a huge, often underestimated part of the equation.
okay, mindset is sorted. We're focusing on progress, embracing mistakes as data. Now let's get back to the tools. How can we leverage specific techniques and technologies to make that rewiring process even more effective? Supercharge the practice.
Right, let's talk about the best machinery for paving those neural roads.
Mindset provides the right foundation. Consistent practice lays the pavement.
Yeah.
Now, what specific tools or machinery can help us lay that pavement faster and better? What's scientifically validated to help the brain learn and retain language more effectively?
Okay, good question. We can start with structured learning tools that are actually built around cognitive science principles. Language learning apps are a great example.
Apps like Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel, lots of people use them. Why are they effective from a brain perspective? Is it just the gamification?
The gamification helps with motivation, which is important. But their real power often lies in the use of spaced repetition systems, or SRS.
Spaced repetition. We hear that term a lot. Can you break down the science? Why is it better than just reviewing notes randomly?
Okay, so it directly tackles something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Basically, we forget things rapidly after we first learn them. Memory decays exponentially.
Right, you learn a word list, and the next day half of it is gone.
Exactly. Spaced repetition fights this curve strategically. An SRS algorithm tracks when you learn a piece of information, like a vocabulary word, and predicts when you're just about to forget it. And that's when it shows it to you again for review.
Ah, so it prompts you right at the critical moment before it fades completely.
Precisely. And the intervals between reviews get progressively longer. You might review a new word after 1 day, then 3 days, then 7 days, then 16 days, and so on. If you get it right, the interval increases. If you get it wrong, the interval shortens.
Why does that increasing interval work so well?
Because each time you successfully retrieve that memory just as it's fading, it signals to your brain, hey, this information is important. I keep needing it. This effortful retrieval process forces the brain to strengthen the neural connection for that memory, consolidating it more effectively into long-term storage. It's far more efficient for long-term retention than cramming or random review.
Okay, so that's the power behind many language apps and also digital flashcard systems like Anki or Quizlet.
Yes, tools like Anki are basically pure SRS engines. And this brings us to flashcards, whether digital or paper. They are essential, but how you make them is crucial.
Right, you mentioned this earlier, not just the word and its translation.
Absolutely not. Always create flashcards with example sentences.
Why is the sentence so much better than just the isolated word?
Because context is everything for building usable language pathways. If your flashcard just says cat, gatto, you're building a simple, weak translation link. Your brain learns to swap one word for another.
Okay.
But if your card says, the fluffy cat is sleeping peacefully on the windowsill, and maybe even has a picture, now your brain isn't just linking cat to gatto. It's linking cat to the concepts of fluffy, sleeping, windowsill, to the grammatical structure, subject, verb, prepositional phrase, maybe to the sound pattern of the sentence. You're building a rich, interconnected English thought unit, not just a translation pair. That's how you build pathways for actual use.
That makes so much sense. Contextual flashcards using SRS.
Got it.
Now let's move into some more maybe advanced techniques, things to really push fluency. You mentioned shadowing earlier as a game changer.
Yes. Shadowing is incredibly powerful, especially for breaking through intermediate plateaus in speaking fluency and pronunciation.
Remind us what it is again.
It's simple in concept. You listen to a native speaker, it could be from a podcast clip, an audiobook, a short video, and you repeat exactly what they say almost simultaneously, just lagging a fraction of a second behind them.
So you're speaking along with them, mimicking everything.
Everything, not just the words, but their rhythm, their intonation, the little pauses, the way they link words together, their speed. You're trying to become their echo, their shadow.
Why is this so potent? What's happening neurally? This is the deep dive part.
Okay, this is cool. When you shadow effectively, you are forcing a more direct connection between your brain's auditory processing areas, where you hear the sound, and your motor speech areas
Right.
that control your mouth to produce the sound. You're trying to bypass the analytical, translating parts of your brain, like the circuitry around Wernicke's and Broca's areas that usually gets involved in constructing sentences from scratch.
So it's like creating a shortcut, auditory input straight to motor output.
Almost. Instead of the usual hear right arrow, understand right arrow, translate maybe, right arrow, formulate response right arrow, speak sequence. Shadowing pushes towards hear right arrow, speak. It forces your brain to focus on the sound and rhythm patterns and reproduce them quickly. This does wonders for making your own speech sound more natural, improving your pronunciation, and speeding up your processing because you're practicing that direct auditory motor mapping. You're training the music of English, not just the words.
Wow. Okay, shadowing. That
Yeah.
sounds challenging but powerful. What's another advanced technique? You mentioned immersive learning. How can someone create immersion if they don't live abroad?
Yeah, true immersion is the gold standard, but you can simulate a lot of it. Immersion is about surrounding yourself with English so constantly that your brain starts to treat it as normal, as just part of the environment, and begins to pick up patterns unconsciously.
Like we talked about with changing phone language and writing lists, but taking it further.
Much further, make English your default for all media consumption. Watch movies and TV shows in English. Initially, maybe use English subtitles, then try removing them altogether. Listen only to English music or podcasts during your commute.
What about online?
Critically important, change your social media feeds. Follow news outlets, influencers, hobby groups, forums, whatever interests you, but only in English. If you love cooking, follow English language chefs. If you love gaming, join English-speaking gaming communities. Fill your digital world with English.
So you're basically tricking your brain, making it think English is just the language the world operates in.
Essentially, yes. The more passive exposure you get, the more your brain gets attuned to the patterns, the vocabulary, the structures. Without conscious effort, it starts recognizing things automatically because it's surrounded.
Okay, that makes sense. Shadowing for active speaking, immersion for passive absorption. What about more focused exercises?
Yes, we need guided practice too. While immersion is great for broad exposure, sometimes you need to zoom in on specific skills or structures. This could be specific exercises like describing a complex picture in detail in English, forcing you to use descriptive adjectives and spatial prepositions, or engaging in targeted question and answer drills focusing on a tricky grammar point, like past modals or conditionals.
So specific tasks to build specific skills.
Exactly. And maybe even a quick moment of mindfulness before you start a learning session. Just taking 60 seconds to clear your mind, take a few deep breaths, and set an intention to focus can actually help your brain absorb information more effectively by reducing mental clutter and stress.
It all comes back to managing the brain state. So the best approach isn't just one tool, is it?
Never. The brain thrives on variety. The most effective learners use a combination strategy. Maybe they use an SRS app for daily vocab, do 10 minutes of shadowing, read an English news article aloud, listen to a podcast passively while driving, and do some structured journaling before bed. Mixing passive immersion with active listening, focused practice, and production exercises attacks the language from all angles and keeps the brain engaged.
Right, hitting those different pathways, using different tools for different jobs. Okay, we've got the science, the roadblocks, the habits, the mindset, and the tools. Now the final, crucial piece. Putting it all together. How do we build an actionable plan and, most importantly, stay consistent?
This is where the rubber meets the road. Because consistency isn't just important, it's the biological requirement for making these brain changes stick.
Right. You can have the best plan, the best apps, the most positive mindset, but if you only practice sporadically, those dirt tracks never get paved. The myelin doesn't get laid down properly.
Exactly. The pathways start to weaken or degrade between sessions if the practice isn't regular enough. Consistency is the engine of neuroplastic change.
And we know life gets in the way. Motivation dips. How do you push through that?
This is where you absolutely must reconnect with your why. Why are you learning English in the first place?
It's your core motivation.
Yes. Is it for a specific job? To travel and connect with people, to challenge yourself, to understand movies without subtitles. Whatever your deep down reason is, write it down. Keep it visible. When you feel like skipping a day, look at your why. Remind yourself what this effort is ultimately for. That intrinsic motivation is your anchor.
And remember the science, too, right? That even a small session counts.
Absolutely. Remind yourself of the biology. Every single 10 or 15-minute session is contributing. It's physically adding a tiny bit more myelin, strengthening a connection just a little. It all adds up. Be kind to yourself if you're tired, but try to be committed to the process.
Okay, let's outline a practical, actionable blueprint. 5 steps to build and maintain consistency. Step 1.
Step 1. Set a daily routine. And be specific. Don't just say, I'll practice daily. Decide when and what. Commit to a non-negotiable time slot, even if it's just 15 to 30 minutes. Maybe it's 15 minutes of coffee in the morning, 15 minutes during lunch. Put it in your calendar like a meeting. And during that time, focus on maybe 1 or 2 of the core practices. Perhaps 10 minutes of active listening, 5 minutes of speaking out loud, summarizing what you heard, or 10 minutes of structured journaling, 5 minutes reviewing flashcards. Make it achievable and concrete.
Okay, schedule it. Step 2.
Step 2. Mindset check. Start your day or your study session with that positive self-talk we discussed. Explicitly remind yourself of your growth mindset. Maybe say out loud, I embrace challenges today, or my English is improving, or I will speak today, mistakes are okay. Set the mental tone.
Reinforce the positive framing daily. Okay, step 3.
Step 3. Tool implementation. Make using a spaced repetition tool, like an app or Anki, non-negotiable daily, even if just for 5-10 minutes. Leverage that science of retention. Review those contextual flashcards. It's one of the highest yield activities you can do in a short time.
Make the SRS tool a daily habit. Got it. Step 4.
Step 4. Inject variety. While routine is good for timing, vary the content of your practice. As we said, the brain learns best with different kinds of input. Don't just do flashcards every day. Mix it up. Monday, shadowing and reading aloud. Tuesday, listening and journaling. Wednesday, app and speaking practice. Keep your brain guessing and engaged by working different linguistic muscles.
Avoid the boredom rut. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And step 5.
Step 5. Seek accountability. This can be surprisingly powerful. Tell someone, a friend, a family member, a language partner about your daily commitment. Ask them to check in with you. Or use a habit tracking app. Or post your progress on social media if that works for you. Knowing someone else might notice if you skip can provide that extra push on low motivation days.
That external pressure can make a difference, especially in those first crucial 21-30 days of building the habit.
Definitely. And one final thought on consistency. What if you do miss a day?
Yeah, because it happens.
It happens. Don't beat yourself up. Life gets busy. The key is, don't miss 2 days in a row. That's often cited as the point where a new habit really starts to unravel. If you miss Monday, make absolutely sure you get back on track Tuesday, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Forgive the lapse, stop the streak of missed days, and start fresh immediately. Progress is cumulative, and maintaining that forward momentum is what ultimately rewires your brain for good.
Okay, that's a really practical framework. So just to bring it all together.
We've covered a huge amount today, really. We've shown that getting fluent isn't some kind of magic. It's really about focused, consistent brain training, understanding how your brain learns best.
Right, understanding microelastics, that moment-to-moment change, knowing you need to build those energy-saving habits through repetition, overcoming roadblocks like fear and internal translation.
Exactly. And then using the right mindset progress over perfection and the right tools. Things like spaced repetition, contextual flashcards, shadowing, immersion techniques, guided practice.
If you combine that commitment to consistency, that growth mindset, and the smart use of these tools, English really can shift from being this difficult, energy-draining task
to becoming an automatic skill, handled effortlessly by your procedural memory. You are literally physically building the fluency you want, one practice session at a time.
You are building those roads in your brain.
That's the goal. And since we know getting started and staying consistent are the biggest hurdles, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought, something to kickstart that 21 to 30-day habit trial right now.
Okay, a challenge.
A small, immediate action. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't wait until later today. As soon as this deep dive finishes, before you click away or do anything else.
What should you do?
Find 3 common essential items in the room you are in right now. Your chair,
Yeah.
the window, your phone, whatever they are.
Okay, 3 items.
And right now, label them in English. You can literally stick a note on them or just write the words down. Chair, window, phone, and then say each word out loud 3 times, maybe pointing at the object.
Chair, window, window.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kickstart that immersion process.
Yeah.
Force that immediate concept to English pathway connection today, right now. No excuses.
That's a great simple starting point. You are capable of this. We hope this deep dive has given you the understanding and the tools.
Keep practicing, stay consistent, embrace the process, and remember, you are physically getting closer to effortless fluency every single day you engage with English. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we give you that shortcut to getting really well informed on some pretty fascinating topics. And today, well, we're on a pretty powerful mission, I think. We're talking about training your brain for English fluency. And look, this isn't just about, the usual study tips. We're diving much deeper. We're really getting into the strategies, the stuff that literally rewires your physical brain. The goal, faster, more automatic, and definitely more confident English communication.
Exactly right. Our sources, they really back this up. Learning a new language. It's less about just hitting the books hard and much more about actual architectural changes happening inside your mind. A lot of adults think their brains are kind of fixed, right? Like that growth, that real change, it stops after you're a kid. But the science, it's overwhelming on this. The brain stays plastic, adaptable. We can absolutely train our neural pathways to think directly in English.
Right, to bypass that really frustrating translation step everyone hates.
Precisely. And start speaking with real fluency.
Okay, so that's our promise to you listening right now. If you ever felt, stuck or maybe just overwhelmed, or maybe you're even convinced you're just sort of bad at languages, like it's in your genes or something. Well, we are here today to completely shift that perspective for you. We're giving you powerful, actionable insights, stuff you can actually use based on how your brain naturally learns to make learning English, well, dramatically easier and faster, too.
Yeah, our deep dive today, it's really about replacing sheer willpower with, a system. It's about swapping out that tedious studying, maybe hours of it, with consistent habits that actually align with how your brain works, neuro-aligned habits. We want to move way beyond just saying study more. We're focusing on how your brain achieves that automatic feeling, automation.
Okay, let's unpack that. That's the foundation, right? This term rewiring your brain. We keep saying it, but what does that actually look like, down at the cellular level? Is it just a nice metaphor or something physically being built?
Oh, it's absolutely physical construction, no question.
Yeah.
When we talk about rewiring, we're really talking about the brain's lifelong ability to reorganize itself. Scientifically, that's known as neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
And when you start learning a new language, you kick off this phase of intense microelastics. These are small, actual structural changes in the brain. They build efficiency for this really complex skill, like speaking English.
I often picture it, like creating new roads in your mind. Maybe in your native language, you've got these huge superhighways, paved, multi-lane, thoughts just fly down them instantly. But English, when you start, it's more like this little dirt path, right? Slow, bumpy, full of potholes.
That analogy,
Yeah.
it's actually very useful, and we can even get a bit more technical with it. When you repeat an English word, or maybe a phrase, you're engaging two key neurological processes. It's quite fascinating. First, you're strengthening the connection between specific neurons. It's a process called long-term potentiation, or LTP for short. Basically, every time you successfully repeat it, the neuron on the receiving end gets better, more responsive to the signal from the sending neuron. So that little electrical spark carrying the meaning of apple, it travels more easily the third time you say it than the very first time.
Ah, okay. So the repetition itself is literally making that connection stronger, thicker, like paving over that dirt path, putting down asphalt.
Precisely. Exactly like that. And the second process, well, it's arguably even more critical for getting that speed, that true fluency. It's called myelination. This is where this fatty tissue, it's called myelin, wraps itself around the axon of the neuron. Think of it like insulation on an electrical wire. The thicker that myelin sheath gets, the faster the signal travels down the wire. The incredible speed of thought you have in your native language. A huge part of that is due to really heavy myelination built up over years. So when you practice English consistently, day after day, you're basically forcing your brain to create new myelin, specifically for those new English circuits.
Okay, that makes so much sense now. That immediately explains that initial frustration people feel, that slow, hesitant feeling when you're trying to speak. It's not because you're not smart enough, it's the actual physical reality of those signals moving slowly on these, uninsulated, unmyelinated axons. It really is a construction phase.
It absolutely is the construction phase, yes. And this mechanism, this brain training, it's fueled by consistent action. Things like listening, actually speaking out loud, reading. When you repeat an action over and over, the brain kind of notices. It thinks, okay, this seems important, and it starts investing its biological resources, building those faster, more efficient connections. It's a biological response to sustained demand. You keep asking, the brain starts building.
So if we stick with that going to the gym analogy, if you want strong muscles, you exercise them regularly, consistently. So if you want strong, fast, automatic English skills, you absolutely have to exercise those specific brain pathways consistently until they get myelinated and potentiated. But
That's exactly. I
it's
mean,
the
here's
end.
maybe the most reassuring part, the best news.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how old the listener is or what their background is. The brain keeps this ability. You're truly never too old to build a new neurological superhighway for English.
Okay, but the challenge is still there, right? Your native language uses these patterns built up over decades, these super deep, heavily myelinated paths. English needs the brain to build completely new patterns, and sometimes these patterns even clash with how your native language works. So, how do we know? How can someone tell if their brain is struggling because it's genuinely learning and growing versus struggling because maybe the method they're using is just wrong?
That's a great question. That initial struggle,
Yeah.
that feeling that words just keep slipping away or the grammar feels totally unnatural, that feeling is almost always a sign of growth. It really
Yeah.
is. It's the friction you feel when you're building something new from scratch.
Yeah.
However, if that struggle just persists, week after week, month after month with absolutely no sense of improvement, then yeah, the method might be flawed. Usually it comes down to a lack of, well, meaningful repetition, or critically, a lack of active engagement. Using the language, we'll definitely talk more about that.
That sets things up perfectly. Because if the process is really just about repetition and building these connections, then why does English feel so incredibly hard for so many people? So hard that they just, give up. Let's dive into that. Section 2. Understanding the obstacles, why English feels so hard.
Right. And the first thing we absolutely have to do is normalize the difficulty. Feeling stuck. That's not a personal failure. Not at all. It's a completely natural biological response. Your brain, fundamentally, is a highly sophisticated machine designed to conserve energy.
Yeah, our sources really emphasize that. The brain is inherently, well, let's call it metabolically conservative. It really prefers to stick with what it already knows
Yeah.
because those familiar neural patterns, they save massive amounts of energy. So when you force it to switch gears into English, especially if you're maybe feeling a bit stressed, it kind of triggers this internal alarm bell. Whoa, hang on, this is high effort. I don't like this.
That is the brain's core resistance right there. Switching from your mother tongue to English literally costs cognitive energy. Yeah. And that cost, it's even higher if your first language is structurally very different from English. Maybe your language doesn't have gendered nouns like English sometimes does, or uses a completely different way of handling tenses. Your brain isn't just swapping out words. It feels like it's having to build a whole new operating system for grammar, for sounds, for sentence structure.
Wow. And then, on top of that structural difficulty, we hit these mental blocks, right? The emotional hurdles that feel just as real as the neurological wiring. And I would argue probably the biggest one is that language anxiety, that pervasive fear of being judged.
Oh, that fear is neurologically significant. Absolutely. When you hesitate to speak because you're afraid of making mistakes, you actually activate the amygdala. That's the brain's threat detection center. And this anxiety, it floods the prefrontal cortex. That's the area responsible for all the sophisticated stuff, like pulling out the right words and applying grammar rules. So essentially, fear literally short-circuits your language center. It shuts it down.
Whoa, okay, so that fear of sounding silly or maybe not being understood, it isn't just an unpleasant feeling, it's physically stopping you from smoothly retrieving the vocabulary that you actually do know.
Exactly. It blocks access. And here's the paradox, the real kicker. Making mistakes is absolutely essential. It's part of how the brain grows and gets stronger. If you wait until you think you're perfect, you never actually activate the motor functions, the speaking parts needed to myelinate those pathways. You never build the road. Mistakes are just feedback. That's all they are. They show the brain exactly where the weak spots are in the circuit so it knows where to reinforce.
Okay, that's huge. We also need to talk about bad habits, right? Specifically, that really debilitating habit so many learners have, translating everything in their head before they speak. I feel like that's the single biggest bottleneck stopping people from sounding fluent.
It really is a major block. When you translate in your head, you're engaging at least 3 cognitive steps, right? First, you think the thought in your native language. Second, you mentally translate that thought into English. Third, you finally try to say the English sentence. But true fluency, that's a direct link. It's thought straight to speaking, all within the target language, English in this case, that extra translation step. It actively prevents the brain from building those direct English pathways because it keeps reinforcing the native language path as the starting point every single time.
Right, it keeps sending traffic down the old highway instead of the new one you're trying to build.
Precisely. And that leads us straight to the crucial use it or lose it principle. It's fundamental in neuroscience. If learners only study grammar rules from a book or memorize vocabulary lists in isolation without ever actually using English, speaking it, writing it, applying it somehow, well, the brain never gets that practical demand signal it needs to start building those automated language roads. It's like having the perfect blueprint for a superhighway, but never actually sending out the construction crews.
Okay, so the big takeaway here for the listener is really important. Feeling like English is difficult isn't about lacking some kind of innate language talent. Not usually. It's much more likely a lack of enough meaningful training and maybe being stuck in the wrong cognitive habits, like that internal translation trap. So we need to consciously build the right habits, the ones that let the brain do what it loves. Automate.
Exactly. And that's the key transition. We need to leverage the brain's fundamental preference for efficiency, for saving energy. Which brings us nicely into section 3, harnessing automation, the power of habits.
Right. Habits. We all have them. Good ones, bad ones. But what are they really from the brain's perspective?
Well, habits are the ultimate energy savers for the brain. Think about it. Driving a route you know well, brushing your teeth, checking your phone maybe, these are automatic actions. The brain loves them because they minimize conscious effort. They take the workload off the high-effort prefrontal cortex and shift it down to the low-effort basal ganglia. It's like putting things on autopilot.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if the brain can automate something as complex as driving a car, surely it can automate retrieving English words and phrases, right?
Yeah.
How do we sort of engineer a language habit?
We basically use the established science of the habit loop. It has 3 parts: cue, routine, reward. The brain tries to create language shortcuts by linking a cue, maybe seeing a particular sign, or feeling hungry to a routine, like thinking the relevant English phrase and then getting a reward, maybe the satisfaction of having the thought correctly or feeling a tiny bit accomplished. So if an English phrase, let's say, I need to get groceries, is repeated often enough and successfully enough, it becomes an automated routine. The brain just runs the program.
Right. So initially, thinking that whole phrase, I need to get groceries, feels slow, maybe a bit weird, clunky. But doing it daily, maybe every time you notice the fridge is empty, that repetition forces the brain to consolidate that specific pathway. The electrical signal for that phrase literally speeds up. It becomes automatic. It just happens without you having to consciously assemble it piece by piece. That's your brain achieving fluency through this consolidation process.
Exactly. And here's the part that should feel really motivating for people: the neurological investment needed for this. It doesn't require these huge heroic efforts. The research is actually very clear on this. Consistency with just, say, 10 or 15 minutes every single day is exponentially more effective for rewiring your brain than trying to cram for 3 hours just once a week.
Yeah.
It's all about the frequency, how often you do it, much more than the duration, how long you do it for in one go.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
huge. But we have to address those bad habits we talked about earlier, like the translating habit. Awareness has to be the first step, right? You need to spot the negative loop. Like cue, I need to speak English. Routine, panic, translate everything in my head. Reward, maybe I avoided making a mistake or just avoided speaking altogether. We need to deliberately break that loop.
Absolutely. Awareness first. Then the replacement habit, the new routine, it needs to start small, really small. And crucially, it needs to remove the pressure of performing for someone else. You can build a new habit just by thinking simple, immediate thoughts directly in English. Like when you glance at the clock, instead of thinking the time in your native language, instantly think, it is 3 p.m. Or you see your phone light up, think, I need to check messages.
Ah, I see. So you're forcing your brain to make that direct switch thought straight into English, but without the stress of a real conversation. It's like internal immersion practice.
Precisely. And here's a really practical tip for creating cues for this. Connect English to your daily life. We sometimes call this environmental association. Say you're cooking dinner. As you grab each ingredient, name it in English, out loud or just in your head. I'm cutting the carrots. Okay, now I'm stirring the soup. That totally mundane, everyday routine of cooking, it becomes the cue for using English. It helps make the language feel less like a school subject you have to study and more like a tool you actually use to navigate your world.
That's incredibly clever, just weaving it into things you already do automatically anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk patience. We often hear that number, like 21 days to form a habit. Is there any neurological basis for that time frame? Why is that number, or maybe 30 days, significant?
Yeah, that 21 to 30-day window, it's generally seen as the period when the brain transitions from needing effortful focus for the new behavior to achieving incipient automation. It's starting to become automatic. It's the period of early consolidation. The initial neural pathways are getting laid down, and the amount of effort, the conscious willpower needed for the routine starts to drop quite significantly. So those first 3 weeks or so, they probably will feel hard. They'll involve a lot of that high-effort prefrontal cortex activity. But sticking with it, pushing through that initial resistance, that ensures the brain starts to actively shift that function into its lower effort, more automatic centers.
Right. So if you can just hang in there for that crucial first month, the practice itself starts feeling less like a chore you have to force yourself to do and more like just part of your routine. It becomes less about willpower and more about just following the established pattern.
Exactly. And that shift, that feeling, that's the magic of automation kicking in.
Okay, fantastic. So now we understand the why, the consistency principle. Let's get really practical. Section 4, the daily action plan. What are the concrete, specific steps our listeners can actually start doing, maybe even today, to begin building these new automated English pathways in their brains?
Okay, the core principle, again, is consistency. We're aiming for small, frequent doses of varied English engagement. That helps build really robust, flexible neural networks.
Right. So practice number 1, daily listening. Our sources often recommend aiming for about 30 minutes a day of dedicated listening. But we need to be clear, right? There's passive listening and active listening.
Yes, that's a crucial distinction. Passive listening is, having an English podcast or TV show on in the background while you're doing the dishes or cleaning. Your brain does register the sounds, the rhythm, the intonation, and that actually helps subtly. But your comprehension, your understanding is probably quite low. Yeah. Active listening, on the other hand, is listening with the specific intention of understanding the message. You're focused. So that recommended 30 minutes. It should prioritize the active form as much as possible.
Okay, so an actionable tip here. Integrate that active listening while you're doing other low-focus activities. Things like walking the dog, your commute to work, maybe light exercise at the gym, perfect times. Use podcasts, maybe like this one, or English news broadcasts, audiobooks, TV shows. And critically, try to find what we call comprehensible input. That's material that's just slightly above your current level, so you understand, say, about 80% of it. This way, your brain is challenged enough to grow, but not so completely overwhelmed that it just shuts down in frustration.
Exactly. Now, practice number 2. This one, honestly, might be the ultimate game changer for reaching fluency. Speaking out loud. The number one reason learners feel stuck, unable to speak, is that they build up great input pathways. They can understand a lot through listening and reading, but they completely neglect the output pathways, the speaking part.
Right. And this practice directly tackles that fear block we talked about. And it forces the brain to engage the motor cortex, the part needed for actual speech production. So, actionable tip. If you don't have someone to practice speaking with regularly, you absolutely must speak to yourself. It might feel weird at first, but it works. Try the reporter game. Just describe what you're doing right now out loud, as if you were a reporter covering the scene. Okay, the host is now pouring a glass of water. The camera's still rolling. Uh-oh, the floor looks silly dusty over there. Silly, maybe, but effective.
Or you could try simple role-playing, maybe in the shower or while you're driving alone. Imagine a basic conversation. You play both parts. You're the flight attendant, and you're also the passenger asking for a drink. This forces you to immediately retrieve vocabulary, put sentences together, apply grammar. It really cements those speaking pathways. It might feel awkward, yeah, but your brain loves that motor practice. It needs it.
Okay, makes sense. Practice number 3, real-life application. This is about making sure English isn't just confined to your study time or a specific corner of your room. The goal here is total integration, making it part of your physical environment.
Right. Practical implementation here means using English for tasks that have real, tangible outcomes. Get some sticky notes and label items all around your house in English. The fridge, the chair, the window, the microwave. Constantly seeing the word reinforces it. Or write short, simple notes to yourself about your daily tasks or plans, but do it only in English. Buy bread. Call Jane tomorrow. Your brain will start to constantly associate those real-world objects and necessary tasks with the English words, forging this really powerful contextual link between the language and your life.
Okay, cool. Practice 4, reading out loud. Why is actually saying the words out loud better than just reading silently in your head?
Because it creates this crucial connection, this bridge between the visual language processing centers in your brain and the auditory motor speech centers. Silent reading mostly just strengthens one half of that circuit, the input side. But reading out loud, even if it's just simple news articles or maybe even children's stories, helps your brain connect the written form of the word to its correct pronunciation, its intonation, its rhythm. So you're strengthening your comprehension and your speaking pathways at the same time. It's very efficient.
Got it. And practice number 5, journaling in English. This sounds like it's about building confidence with written production, right? Not just speaking.
Exactly. And again, start small. Don't try to write an essay on day one. Just aim for, say, 3 sentences every day. Write about your day, what you did, your plans for tomorrow, how you're feeling right now. The beauty of journaling is that the audience is just you. So that fear of judgment we talked about is completely removed.
Yeah.
And it forces your brain to take maybe complex thoughts or feelings and structure them directly in English. Again, bypassing that need to translate first.
Okay, so these 5 practices, listening, speaking aloud, real-life application, reading aloud, and journaling, they're like the physical work, the construction work, following that consistency principle. They're small, they add up over time, and they're designed to make English feel like an automatic, natural part of your daily life, turning those dirt paths into proper roads.
Precisely. So now that we've got the actions, the what to do, let's talk about the essential element that really fuels all of them, that sustains the effort, your mindset. This brings us to section 5.
The mental shift mindset matters. Yeah, it seems impossible to talk about physically rewiring your brain without also talking about the huge role your self-talk plays. Your thoughts, they really function like powerful instructions to your whole neural network, don't they? If you keep feeding your brain the belief, oh, I'm just not good at English, or I'm always going to struggle with this, well, your brain kind of follows that instruction. It starts looking for evidence to prove you right, reinforcing that limitation.
That internal narrative, it absolutely becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It shapes your experience.
Yeah.
So we need what psychologists call cognitive reframing. We need to consciously change the script. Instead of that negative thought, maybe after a conversation felt difficult, like, ugh, I totally failed that. You need to shift the script, reframe it. Tell yourself something positive and true, like, okay, wow, I actually used 3 new verbs in that conversation today, and I know I'm getting better every single day.
Right. And there's actual neuroscience behind why that works, isn't there? It's not just wishful thinking. That positive self-talk, celebrating those small wins, it releases dopamine in the brain. And dopamine is the main chemical for motivation, for reinforcing habits. So you're basically chemically rewarding your brain, prompting it to seek out and repeat the behavior learning English that produced that good feeling. You're hacking your own motivation system.
You are. And this is so critical for how we reframe mistakes. A mistake isn't a failure. It's just high-value data. That's all. Every single time you speak or write or try something in English and make an error, your brain uses that specific error to fine-tune the connection for the next time you try. Mistakes are literally steps forward. They are proof that you are actively engaging the system, trying things, and providing the essential feedback your brain needs for refinement.
I remember one of the sources we looked at mentioned a study. It found that learners who focused on the effort they were putting in rather than just the outcome or being perfect, they actually showed higher retention rates. They remembered more, and they had less anxiety. They were more willing to try difficult tasks because their goal was just trying, putting in the work, not necessarily achieving perfection right away.
That really captures the heart of the growth mindset. It is perfectly okay if you don't speak perfectly. Language isn't a performance, it's communication. What truly matters is the consistent effort, showing up, speaking, learning, improving bit by bit. And when you shift your focus to progress, asking yourself, did I use 1 new word today? Or did I understand a bit more of that podcast than yesterday? The whole process starts to become intrinsically enjoyable. English stops feeling like this terrible chore you have to do and starts feeling like an interesting journey.
So the ultimate mindset shift we're aiming for here is replacing that paralyzing thought, oh, I'll never achieve fluency, with something proactive, something powerful. An affirmation like, I am actively building my fluency every single day with every little thing I do. That allows the brain to focus on the construction, on the building, rather than getting stuck on the perceived limitation.
Absolutely. We're consciously shifting from what's called a fixed mindset, my abilities are set, to a growth mindset, my abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. And that shift, it dramatically accelerates learning speed because those neural pathways for English start getting associated with positive feelings, motivation, and a sense of success, however small those successes might be initially.
That mental fuel is just essential, isn't it? Okay, so we've got the mindset right. Now let's talk about speding things up even more. acceleration. Section 6 is all about the specific tools and techniques you can use to really optimize this construction process, make the rewiring happen even faster.
Okay. Tool number 1,
Mhm.
language learning apps. You know the popular ones, Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel. There are many. They're incredibly popular and often quite fun to use. But their real power isn't just in the points or the leaderboards, the gamification stuff. It's the underlying mechanism that the good ones employ, spaced repetition.
Right, space repetition. We've touched on it, but let's really explore this. This seems like a key technical insight. Explain why space repetition acts like a neuroaccelerator. Why does it work so well for memory?
Okay, so spaced repetition directly combats something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. It's a well-known principle in psychology.
Yeah.
Basically, our brain naturally forgets information over time, and it forgets quite quickly at first. Now, if we review a new word or phrase again immediately after learning it, well, the memory connection doesn't get much stronger because it was already active. But if we wait too long to review it, the connection might be completely gone, and we have to learn it all over again from scratch. Spaced repetition algorithms, the software in these apps, they're designed to schedule your reviews at the optimal moment, just as the memory trace is about to fade. This intentional, precise timing maximizes the consolidation process. The brain is forced to retrieve the memory right when it's starting to become a little difficult, and that effort strengthens the synaptic connection exponentially each time you successfully retrieve it.
Wow, okay. So using one of these dedicated apps, maybe just for 10 minutes a day, that automatically schedules the review for you is actually way more efficient for building long-term memory than just, say, trying to review a huge stack of 100 flashcards all at once. It's optimizing how memory forms.
Precisely. It works with your brain's natural forgetting process, not against it. Now, tool number 2 builds on this, flashcards. But crucially, they need to be utilized correctly. Digital options like Anki or Quizlet are fantastic because they often incorporate spaced repetition algorithms too. But whether digital or good old paper cards, the key ingredient is context. If you only memorize the single word cat on one side and its translation on the other, you've only really strengthened one single isolated neural link. It's not very useful.
Right. So the correct practice, based on everything we've looked at, is to create flashcards using example sentences, isn't it? You're not just learning cat, you're learning something like, the fluffy black cat is sitting on the warm mat.
That is absolutely vital, yes.
Mhm.
When you do that, you're linking the new word cat into a grammatical structure, into a meaningful context. You're immediately forming a much more complex and therefore more usable neural network around that word. It connects to fluffy black sitting mat, see? And that makes it much, much easier for your brain to actually retrieve and use that word correctly when you're trying to speak naturally.
Makes total sense. Okay, tool number 3, deep immersive learning. The goal here sounds like it's about making English completely unavoidable in your daily life. We want to kind of trick the brain into believing that English isn't just something you study, but it's a necessary, permanent fixture of its operating environment.
Exactly. Total immersion, even if you can't physically move to an English-speaking country. This requires pretty comprehensive integration into your daily life. Change the language settings on your phone, your computer, your social media apps. Set your car's GPS or map app to give directions in English. Watch English movies and TV shows, but use English subtitles, not subtitles in your native language. That forces you to connect the sound with the written word. Follow English-speaking accounts on social media news outlets, influencers, hobby groups. This ensures this continuous, often low-effort exposure, forcing your subconscious brain to recognize grammar patterns, sentence structures, and new vocabulary constantly.
Okay. Tool number 4, shadowing. You mentioned this earlier. This sounds like arguably the most powerful speaking technique someone can do on their own outside of having a real conversation partner, but it sounds like it requires intense focus.
It does, yes. Shadowing involves listening very closely to a native English speaker, maybe from a podcast clip, an audiobook, or a speech. And then almost immediately, like a split-second echo, you try to repeat exactly what they say. And you're not just mirroring the words, you're trying to match their cadence, the rhythm, the stress patterns on syllables, the intonation, the rise and fall of their voice.
Okay, what's the specific neurological benefit there? What's happening in the brain when you do that?
It creates this incredibly powerful, rapid feedback loop. Your auditory center is processing the incoming sound pattern. And almost simultaneously, your motor speech center is trying to reproduce that exact pattern. This forces the brain to very quickly map the sound it's receiving to the precise vocal motor movements required to make that sound. It improves your pronunciation dramatically. And also trains your vocal cords, your tongue, your mouth muscles to actually handle English sounds, rhythms, and flows that might not even exist in your native language.
Fascinating. Okay, tool 5. Guided practice. This sounds like it moves beyond just random repetition or shadowing and more towards deliberately targeting specific skills.
Yes, guided practice involves doing focused exercises designed to strengthen particular areas. For instance, you might spend 10 minutes just practicing forming complex questions in English, maybe using different verb tenses. Have you ever? Were you going to? Might you consider? Or you could take a detailed, unfamiliar picture and try to describe everything you see in it out loud for 5 minutes without stopping or pausing too much. The more focused and specific the exercise, the more intense the myelination, that installation process becomes in that particular area of your linguistic performance. You're strengthening a specific skill circuit.
Right. And finally, tool 6, mindfulness. Now, this isn't a tech tool like an app, but more of a mental technique. How does simply focusing your attention better actually accelerate language learning?
Well, language learning is highly sensitive to your attention span. If you're learning passively, maybe half listening while doing something else, the effort is low. And guess what? The retention, how much you remember, is also low. Mindfulness, which is essentially the practice of clearing your mind of distractions and focusing intensely on what you're absorbing or what you're trying to produce right now, that intense focus helps the brain mark that incoming information as high priority. This significantly increases the likelihood of long-term potentiation, strengthening those connections, and memory consolidation, making the memory stick.
Okay. So the overall strategy with all these tools seems pretty clear. Variety keeps the brain interested and engaged, building different types of connections, and consistency ensures those pathways actually get built and strengthened over time. So maybe combine using a language app daily with doing some shadowing a few times a week and underpin it all with that positive, growth-oriented mindset.
That is the blueprint, yes. And as we head into our final section now, let's talk about building and sustaining the momentum for all this. Because rewiring your brain, honestly, it demands resilience. It takes time.
Oh, I can definitely personally attest that the frustration is real. I remember when I was trying to learn Spanish, there was this moment in a conversation where an entire vocabulary list I knew I'd studied just vanished from my memory. Blank. And the immediate instinct is to just label yourself a failure, right? See, I can't
Yeah.
do this. But the breakthrough, just like you said earlier, it came when I managed to reframe it, to view that momentary blank, not as proof that I was inadequate, but more like a diagnostic test from my brain. Like my brain was telling me, okay, that specific word, or maybe that whole category, needs more practice, needs more myelination.
That shift in perspective from harsh self-criticism to just neutral, objective assessment, it's monumental. It changes everything. And remember, every single time you push through one of those awkward moments, every time you try to speak, even when it feels hard, your brain is strengthening that circuit. You are succeeding just by trying. And the key to staying motivated through those tough moments, as our research consistently shows, is deeply understanding and regularly revisiting your why.
Right. Why are you, the listener, learning English in the first place? Is it really important for your career advancement? Do you dream of traveling the world without needing a translator? Or maybe it's about connecting more deeply with friends or loved ones who speak English? Or just personal growth? When doing that daily 15 minutes feels just too hard one day, remembering that fundamental core reason why you started, that can provide the deep intrinsic motivation you need to override your brain's natural desire to just conserve energy and do something easier.
And we really cannot overstate the power of accountability. Language is inherently social, and learning often works best when it's social too. Tell a trusted friend or a family member, maybe even a colleague, about your learning goal, what you're trying to achieve with English. Just having someone to check in with occasionally, someone who knows your goal, it provides this powerful yet gentle external nudge on those days when your internal motivation might be lagging a bit. You're essentially investing in your own learning journey by setting up these external support systems.
Okay, fantastic. So let's bring all of this incredible insight together now into a really concise, clear action plan for you, the listener. Consider this your homework from our deep dive today into these neurostrategies.
Okay. Action step number 1. Set a daily routine. Commit to a specific block of time each day, maybe just 15 minutes to start, maybe 30 if you can manage it. And in that time, choose at least 2 of the core practices we discussed. For example, maybe 15 minutes of active listening, finding that comprehensible input, and then 15 minutes of speaking out loud, doing shadowing or playing that reporter game. Consistency has to be the absolute foundation of everything else you do.
Right. Action step 2. Focus deliberately on your mindset. Start your day, maybe even before you get out of bed, with that cognitive reframing we talked about. Consciously change your internal self-talk. Replace "this is hard" with "I am actively building my English fluency today with every step I take." This primes your brain for growth. It makes it actively look for learning opportunities throughout the day rather than focusing on limitations or difficulties.
Action step 3. Use the tools strategically. Download a good language learning app, one that explicitly uses spaced repetition, and commit to using it for maybe just 10 or 15 minutes each day. And crucially, when you're learning vocabulary, whether with an app or flashcards, make sure you practice those words in full contextual sentences. Maximize those synaptic connections. Don't just learn isolated words.
Perfect. And finally, action step 4. Stay consistent, but forgive yourself too. Remember, the brain responds best to patterns, to regularity, not necessarily to perfection. If you happen to miss a day of practice, life happens, right? Do not abandon the habit altogether. Don't let it derail you. The absolute key is to just start again immediately the very next day. Get back on track. Those new neural pathways you're building, they need frequent activation to stay strong and alive. If you stop completely for too long, the brain starts pruning those connections, thinking they're not important anymore.
Remember, rewiring your brain does take intentional, consistent effort. It won't happen overnight. But every single attempt you make, every new word you listen to and try to understand, every phrase you bravely speak out loud, even if imperfectly, all of it is measurable progress. You absolutely are capable of this. And by focusing on these neurostrategies, you're genuinely using the fastest, most effective path available to achieve English fluency.
That is a phenomenal summary of everything we've covered. Thank you. And building on that idea of consistency and making it easy, since we know the brain loves saving energy through habits. Here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over and explore on your own. Think about one existing, totally unbreakable daily habit you already have, something you do every single day without fail, something you'd almost never skip. Maybe it's making your morning coffee, or your first scroll through social media, or waiting for the bus or train. Now, how could you anchor a very short English practice, maybe shadowing just a 30-second audio clip, or thinking 3 simple thoughts directly in English, directly to that existing automatic habit? By piggybacking the new, perhaps still difficult behavior onto that established, effortless one, you might just ensure consistency without needing any extra willpower at all. You'd be guaranteeing that myelination process continues almost effortlessly.
Make the choice effortless.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. Keep practicing, stay consistent in applying these neurostrategies, and please remember, you truly are actively building a faster, stronger brain for English every single day.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Keep growing, keep learning, and keep rewiring that amazing brain of yours for fluency.